Um, a lot of my students struggle with vocabulary. And not necessarily the clinical vocabulary, but the vocabulary that the test is written. It is written in a very high vocabulary. The assumption is that you have a master's degree. They didn't give you a master's degree; you've earned it. So the assumption is that you really have to have a really high vocabulary. The best way to increase your vocabulary is to read. Is to read. I have a PhD and I hate reading. I am not gonna lie. I like to be read to. When I did my PhD research, I clicked on the articles that would read to me. I swear I would. I do. On our TVs, the closed caption is always on. It's been always on since my kids were little. That's how that word is pronounced, because sometimes you can see it, you never knew how it was pronounced. So those are ways just in general to increase your vocabulary. IQ, the Wechsler, the WAST, those kind of things are based on your vocabulary. And you really have to have a higher vocabulary to pass this test. You really just do. So especially if you're, reading online or doing some test questions, we can talk about text, how to look at those words in context, try to figure out what they mean. But whenever you see a word that you really don't know what it means, the best thing really is just to go back and research it and Google it. And I don't mean, the clinical words, the everyday words. Okay. I'm a huge fan of accommodations. I'm a huge fan. And those of you who say, I can't do that, it's embarrassing, I just want to remind you that when you look at our country and look at, the people that we allow in our country who are, English is not their first language, right? Doctors, lawyers, people like that, who many times, and a lot of my college professors, a lot of my colleagues, they don't speak, their English is sometimes hard to understand. They had to pass this test in English. They got accommodations, okay? I recommend 2 extra hours and a private room. I recommend at the basic level. Your own children, okay? For what you need is there's a form on the website, the NBCC website, and you can ask for accommodations. You download it. You need to have a reason for it. So anxiety, ADHD, you know, some phobia, social phobia, any of those things. If English is your language, every state but New York will do that as well. You just have to prove that English is your second language. But I highly recommend accommodations. Even if you only have test anxiety, that's a huge deal. You cannot perform at your best when your anxiety's up here. And the guy sitting beside you who's taking the realtor exam and he keeps clicking, 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 and he's done in an hour and you're freaking out. Let's change that. Let's ask for a private room and 2 extra hours at a minimum. Okay. If you have any medical issues, I suggest you always ask for time for food and drinks. Okay, because you really want to keep your blood sugar up. So it really is a power test. The assumption is you have enough time to power through it. You just have to really give it all you got and power through. Associate this to our Super Bowl, right? So this is the best of the best of the best. You're the cream of the crop. Even if you're at your PhD or you're a doctor level candidate, you don't get any higher licensure than this license, right? You're at the top. This is the pinnacle of your career. So when they're playing in the Super Bowl, and I'm not a football fan, so please don't correct me later and tell me I'm wrong. But the day before, you relax, right? But you practice the same way that you play. You get out there when they're playing before COVID, right? You would hear the sounds. They'd play the crowds roaring in. They'd practice the way they play. So you really have to do those practice tests the same way. You're going to sit with 4 hours, sit with the mask on, right? If you're wearing glasses, they're going to fog up. They're going to fog up. Okay? Sit with minimal around a noise around you if you can do that. If you read out loud when you're taking the practice test, you need to read out loud when you're taking the real test. That means you need accommodations because you can't read out loud when there's people around you. Okay? If you already have a test date, accommodations will set you way back, so I don't recommend that. Okay, but if you haven't got a test date yet, it's on the site. It is on the NBC site. It just says accommodation forms. It's right there. Okay, you can get accommodations for anything that your medical doctor or your mental health professional will sign off on. Okay, so due to HIPAA, they're not going to ask you details of your medical problem, right? So if you have Lyme disease, if you have whatever disease, whatever you have, you really just kind of make sure that you take that into consideration. And don't beat yourself up. If you've taken this test more than once or twice, you need to look at accommodations. Okay? And especially if you're getting to the end and you don't have enough time, we're missing something there. We're missing something. And one of the things I like about tutoring is I really am able to kind of sit with you and figure out like what we're missing and what we need to go over. But you know, if that's not always the case, and you can't get in with me, Lord knows I'm busy, you're missing something. You're missing something. This test is not out to get you. It is not. I don't care what everybody on Facebook says. It is not out to get you. It is written by you in a few years. Okay? So what happens is every so often they open up for test writers. You get paid to write these questions. You get paid. Paid. Okay? So all the money you spent taking this test, you'll see on the site, they'll open for writers, okay? And they put you through a training, and then they ask you to, you have to be licensed, and they ask you then to submit some questions, and you get paid for those questions. They're not these evil people out to get you. They're you in a few years, okay? And we want licensure. We do. I don't think we have to have licensure. This is so hard. When I got my nails done, she better have a license, right? That stuff better stick on for more than 2 or 3 days because she didn't pass her license test or she didn't want to study. No, we want licensure. When you take your kids to the pediatrician, when you go see your own therapist, when your kid's at school with a teacher, you want someone to have some licensure, right? It's important. It's important. So, and it's very, very doable. Very doable. It's a matter of really making this a priority. Okay? If you have a master's degree, if you're sitting here right now, you can pass this test. I don't care how many times you've taken it before, you can pass this test. That simple. My flowers, thank you. They are. I love flowers. That's one of my self-indulgence. I have a cleaning lady, and every 10 days she changes my flowers. And she just buys them at Walmart, and then I have 4 different bouquets in my house. I love flowers, so yeah. And my wall is back. So it's a tapestry. So Amazon. I've been teaching online for about 5 years. So before COVID hit, I've always been teaching online. I have studio lighting in my office also. So you'll see Alexa, office light on. So I have lighting everywhere, but I have studio lighting. I've been teaching for a while. Okay, so anyway, back to the test. So again, we are going in and we can do this. You can do this. So you cannot do it when you're full of anxiety. So we've got to get our anxiety in check. If that means medication, if that means more time. I've had people, if you live in a legal marijuana state and that works for you, just don't try it the day of the test, girl. No. Don't try it the day of the test. Whatever you try, try the day before the test, okay? I've had some CBD oil people use. I had people do some mints or some lavender in their mask. Whatever you need to calm you down, you need to do. You need to figure it out before the day of the test. Okay? It's that simple. A little anxiety is good for you. A little anxiety keeps you from, that fight or flight, right? It keeps you from being eaten by the bear. You're going to run. But too much anxiety, it's called the Yerkes-Dodson theory. Too much anxiety is going to kick your butt. We know at the little level, I'll lose my keys. I'll lose my bank card. A little anxiety, right? Oh my gosh, a big anxiety? How the heck am I supposed to use the best of my abilities to pass a test when I'm down here? That's just not possible. It's not possible. So get those things in check. Now, when it comes to studying for the test, if you've seen any of my videos before, if you have studied for 5 hours and you've been in that book for 5 hours and you've listened to Rosenthal 5 hours and you can't tell me anything, girl, you wasted your time. Okay? We can sit there for all day, but if you can't tell me what you've learned, you have wasted your time. I usually say no more than an hour in a setting. Research says that most of us an hour and a half. Okay? Why do you think TV shows are like 35 minutes with commercials? Because our attention span just isn't that long. It really isn't. So what I suggest is if you need to study more than a couple times a day, then no more than an hour at a setting. So typical, what I normally say is 90 days. 90 days, and you need to smell like the test. Do you know how alcoholics, they stop drinking, they still reek of alcohol? They're sweating like alcohol. That's how you should smell. Everybody should know that you're studying for the test. You should have sticky notes on your car windows and your phone, and everything should have like Erickson stages and actually Piaget written up there. Everyone around you should know that you're studying for this test for 90 days. Everyone, okay? Tell the mailman about Piaget stages. Whatever. Okay? Tell your dog. It doesn't matter. You can teach everything to your kid but Freud. Because they go to school and they talk about the oral stage and they're fixated on the oral stage because it's sex and Freud, the teacher's going to call you. So don't do that one. But all the other things you can teach your kids. No, it doesn't really matter. Just teach somebody, and you want to teach them like you're teaching a 6-year-old. So that means putting it in your own words that you really, really understand it. if you can cite Erickson's stages and ages, and I ask you a question and you're like, I don't know, then you don't know it. Because you have to know what it looks like in the question. Because the test questions are so vague. They're not going to say Erickson. They're going to say, using a psychosocial developmental theorist, and they're going to give you some information, and you have to know which one it is, right? So you really have to know them. So studying should look like, and again, if you have the full 90 days, and that's what I recommend, should look like breaking it down to pieces. I usually start with careers because that's where my students know the least. And you know you're the best, but in general, my students know the careers the least. We don't use that every day. We don't go around and spout things, right? Did you know that Super's rainbow theory said? Okay, so we really don't use that every day. So that's why I suggest that you learn that first. But break it down. You should know super. You should know his crystallization. You should know what age that happens. Super said that we should all be in our jobs at the age of 25. Did you know that? Okay, yeah, right. Fully established in our career by 25, on to stabilization by 30. But remember, Super wrote those stages for white educated men in the late 50s, early 60s, right? Leave it to Beaver, happy days. So that's when he wrote those stages for. So 25, somebody should tell my kids that. 25 should be off your mother's dime. My 24-year-old's graduating. Well, I'm not ready to work yet, Mom. Please. But Super sad. You should have been your career. Okay, but you really should know them that way. And what you're going to do is if you're learning Super today, then whatever you learn in the morning, you're going to spend an hour in the morning before you get up or when you get up. And then at lunchtime, same information. At dinner time, the same information. And that full day, all you think is Super step. Super, super, super. The next day, you're going to pick up something else, right? And not lose what I kept the same day. So go back and pick it up, go back and pick it up, and over and over and over again. And you need to be able to really, if I ask you a question, you should be able to know it without looking at your notes. And if that means you have to study it 5 or 6 days before you know it, that's really okay. Because I'd rather spend 5 or 6 days knowing this and half a knowing everything, because that's not going to work for you. There's no easy way out on this test. You just have to know it, okay? And again, break it up into parts and pieces. So how do you know what kind of learner you are? So if you are writing notes right now as we're talking, and you're writing notes and they're like green and red stickies, you're highlighting it with a different color, oh my gosh, that makes me crazy. Okay, but you're definitely you're definitely a kinesthetic learner. You need to touch it, right? You need to touch it and feel it, and you need to like hold it in your hand and write out the notes, right? Okay, I like to listen. I like to listen. I'll listen to CD all day long, and I can tell you exactly what it said. But that's my style. I'm an auditory processor. But you have to know your style. When I'm tutoring you, if I've tutored you before and you've seen me, you turn on your camera and I see like red and green and blue sticky notes behind me. Like, that makes me crazy. Oh my God, that makes me crazy. It's just me. So don't say because someone on Facebook said they got the. No. How do you learn? How did you get through college? What did you do? That's all that matters. What did you do? Okay? I do a lot of public speaking, and when I do a lot of speak, I will write my speech, I will speak it into my phone, record it, and go back and listen to it over and over and over again. And it's my speech, I wrote it. But for me to learn it and be able to speak it, that's how I learn. Okay? So if you're enjoying this auditory and it's good, you'll go back and watch it later, take notes, that's how you learn. But if you really need the sticky notes, then do it. If you don't, if you're just a visual and you see the notes, you can buy those already made note cards, right? Or you can go to like Quizlet and they're already made note cards. So if you don't need to write them and you just need to see them, no, go there and just get them already. So it depends on how you learn, okay? So we can do this, you can do this, you can do this. I promise you, you can do this. It is a very doable test. The other thing I talk about the importance of mindfulness, okay? And that belongs to DBT, of course, right? That's for our borderline personality disorders. But when you're taking that test, I took my test really 20, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, wow. I remember, this is back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the land, way back when. One-room schoolhouse, my kid would say. We had a pencil and paper test. You had to wait 6 weeks for your test. We drove up the night before. And I was pregnant with my son. And I couldn't sleep. And you had to drive up like this site forever. And, my husband wouldn't let me go by myself. Anyway. But I remember sitting in that room. I had my number two pencils all sharpened and ready to go. But I looked around the room and remember, I'm in the room. I'm in the room. And how long did it take you to get in the room? Those of you that struggled with that master's degree, that struggled with the bachelor's degree, and when you got the master's, people said you couldn't do it. You are in the room. You're in the room with the best and the brightest because you're one of them. So mindfulness talks about enjoying that moment without judgment. I just want to enjoy that moment. I made it to the room. Come what may, I'm in that room. Okay, and pat yourself on the back and enjoy that moment because you are, everything you worked for is for that moment right there. And not to induce more pressure, but just to get you to realize how great you are. You're there. You're in the room. Okay? No changing any answers. Don't you dare change answer on the test. Don't you dare. I'll come and find you and choke your neck. Don't you dare. Okay? If you thought it was the answer the first time, don't you dare go back and change it. No. Okay? You can go through and you can flag it. Okay? Don't flag too many because if you flag too many, you're running out of time. You got 27 unanswered questions. So don't do that. But if you're okay, and then come back. But do not go back. I don't care how much extra time you have. Do not go back and change those answers. It made sense when you did it, and that's probably the right answer. Don't change it. We're going to talk tonight about the way that we answer questions and really kind of the prove it method, going back to the question so you know it's the answer. But trust that. You have a master's degree. When you tutor with me or this session or when you read Rosendahl or anything else, I'm not teaching you brain surgery. This is not dental hygienist school, right? All I'm doing is reminding you of things that you already knew. So you may not know why you know, but you know it. So all we're doing is refreshing, bringing those things from back to the front, right? Back to the front. Okay, so I usually use Helwig. He is my absolute favorite. I like the way he is written out. I always use more than one source, okay? And I know the Purple Book swears he is the best thing ever, and you just need his book, and that's it. Sorry to bust his bubble and your bubble. That is not quite true, okay? Great for info. I'm not going to lie. Probably too much info, though. Probably some things that you just don't need. Way too much information. Don't really care where they were born. Don't really care what happened. All I care about is the keywords to help me pass this test. That's what I'm looking for. What keywords do I need to know to help me pass this test? So I use Helwig. I use the Purple Book. I use the Green Book. Anything that I have, you are more than welcome to have. Anything I use today, I will send with you. We'll go through, and if I didn't send something in the email text, just be sure that you ask Prudence, and she'll give a copy of whatever I use today. Information is never the problem. The problem is more of how we kind of use that information, how we know that information. So I'm going to pull up my screen and share screen. A question in general, guys, on test taking. Those of you who are taking it at home, let me tell you, so you don't get accommodations if you're taking it at home. And if you're not sure how that works, it is an additional company. And the company has purchased the software has been purchased by the NBCC for you to take this test at home. And what you do is you're going to have to hold up your ID, and you're going to scan your ID to make sure it's you. And then there's a camera there, and that camera is going to be watching you. So if your eyes look at something too often or your eyes linger at some point, they're going to like ding you, like ding, ding, ding. So they're trying to make sure that you don't have like roads written up there or things like that. When I'm thinking sometimes, I'll like this and I'm like just thinking. Okay, so be careful of that because that'll get you a ding. It doesn't mean they won't grade it. It doesn't mean that. It just means it'll get you a ding. So just be careful with that. You kind of take your laptop and you'll scan the area, scan the room, underneath the desk, all those things around you, okay, and they'll give you a time to start. So you don't get accommodations if you're at home, but I think a lot of us, if you can take it at home or a nice quiet place, then you probably don't need the accommodations, right, because you're pretty comfortable there. You can't pick if you can take it home or not. There's several, you get an option to take it home, but if you don't get that option, you can't call them up and say, hey, I want to take it at home. It doesn't work that way. Sorry. I do think that we're going that way in the future. I think that's where we're headed. This is the second round of piloting I've seen, so I'm hoping that'll work. Passing score. These days seems to be about an 89, but that changes depending on what state you're in. How do we find if we pass? So it kind of depends on your state. So if your score is obviously high, it'll say pass. I've seen some scores where people are not really sure if they scored, and you have to wait those 6 weeks. But most often, if it's above a 95, you definitely passed, no matter what state you're in. Okay, but sometimes those 84s, 85s, I'm not really sure. Okay, so those are a little bit different in each state. But 89 is what I've been seeing in my southern states. Anybody seeing a lower score than that in any of the states? Passing score of lower than 89? As a rule, my southern states have lower scores than my northern states, except for Louisiana. Louisiana is the hardest state to get a license. I don't know what they require down there. They're just a whole different world, I swear. And if you live there, it's on. It's just that they don't want to. It's a 95. It is, and it's hard to do reciprocity too. They don't want to take anybody else's licensure. I don't know what their problem is. So, and again, I'm not picking on Louisiana. Please don't text me. Don't put on Facebook. I don't like Louisiana. That's not it. It's just one of the harder tests they see a license in. Okay, so let me pull up my screen here. And as I said, I'm using my Helvig book to kind of go through. Texas was 95 last year. Yeah, but have we seen Texas recently? Anybody seen Texas recently? So what happened is we piloted the test last February. And you know, in order to do, when we talk about research, it normally takes about 90 days to get a really good idea. And because COVID hit, we really did get a full 90 days of having that 84. 5, which was the test for most everybody. But that I've seen it this year, I have seen it about 89 in a lot of my states. If you don't pass, they provide you with instructions on how to retest. They do. So you have to wait 90 days, and they'll tell you once your 90 days is up, you can go back in and you can request more time or request a new date. Texas is the one, I think Texas gives you 3 times, and then you have to file an appeal. But I've never seen anyone not be granted an appeal. Okay. You can take it in a different state, but you're still taking the licensure for that state you live in. Does that make sense? So if you live in like Louisiana and Texas, and some of those states are really close, I live in Tennessee and I work in Georgia. So if I took the test in Georgia, I'm still taking the Tennessee licensure. So I still have to pass Tennessee requirement, not Georgia's requirements. Florida is 77. Oh, that can't be true. Maybe the CPCE, but not the NCE. That's way too low. I'm not doubting you that way. I'm sorry, but that's just that it's probably the CPCE, and the CPCE is set by your school, and your school gets to decide what's a passing score on the CPCE.